All right, let's start off on number 2 here. So for this one, we're going to set this up in standard form, or sorry, not standard form first. We're going to do vertex form first and then switch it into standard form. So vertex form is going to be y equals some value a. We don't know it yet. And then we're always switch the x value of the vertex. So it's going to be x minus 1 and then squared. And then we keep the y value of the vertex the same, so that's going to be 10. All right, so now we need to find this a value, and to do that we use the other point as an x comma y. So I plug in the 8 right there. I'm going to leave a as a variable, plug in x. Now I got to figure out what a is. So I'm going to do some PEMDAS here. So -1 squared. So 8 equals a times -1 squared plus 10. And then we have to square that -1 according to PEMDAS. So that's going to turn it into 1a plus 10. So now we need to isolate a, so I'm going to subtract 10 over. So it looks like a equals -2. So now I can write this in vertex form. So we get y equals, let's see. I'm just going to go back to the, actually, let me get some more space here. All right, so I'm going to go back to this original form, but I'm just going to replace the a now with the -2 that I figured out. And now we do need to switch it into standard form. So we're going to do that by, first of all, writing that parentheses twice, x minus 1. And then we have plus 10 out there. That was a plus. Okay, so now I need to multiply these two together. X minus 1 times x minus 1. I like to use the box for that. This will be x squared minus x, and then plus 1. And so I'm going to leave this -2 outside, and then instead of this, I'm going to replace it with the contents of my box, which is x squared minus 2x plus 1. And I'll still have that plus 10 out back. And so now what I need to do is distribute that -2. So you have -2x squared plus 4x minus 2 plus 10. And now lastly, we'll just combine like terms. We get -2x squared plus 4x plus 8. All right, same idea here on number 4. So I'm first going to write my vertex form. So that'll be y equals some value a times x plus 2 squared. So I always change the sign on that x value. And then we'd keep the sign regular on the y value. So now I need to use the other point to find my a value. So I'm going to plug in -32 for y, 1 for x. All right, and then we put -32 in there, a times, and then we'll do the PEMDAS here, so 1 plus 2 is 3, and then 3 squared is actually 9, so I'm going to call this 9a plus 4 equals -32. We'll now subtract the 4 over, so -36 equals 9a, and then divide that by 9, so a equals -4. So we have our vertex form now. We'll be, just copy this over. Let's change that into a -4 times x plus 2 squared plus 4. Okay, now we have to expand this. So once again, just like last problem, I'm going to write the parentheses twice. And then I'm going to multiply it together using the box. So we get x squared, 2x, and 4. So I'm going to leave this -4 out here and then fill out the contents of the box inside of parentheses and make sure I still have this plus 4 from out back. So now we're going to distribute this in here. So this becomes -4x squared minus 8x minus 16 plus 4. And lastly, we'll just combine like terms here, so we get a -12 out back. All right, next up, we need to do some factoring here. So on this one, we're going to do grouping since we have 4 terms. So the first group, I can take out 4n squared, which leaves me with 5n minus 1. And on this one, I'm going to take out -1, which leaves me with 5n minus 1 as well. Remember, taking out a negative, we'll switch the signs. So then we have 4n squared minus 1 times 5n minus 1. And then I do notice that this is the difference of perfect squares on one of these. And so whenever it's the difference of perfect squares, I can split it up again. So this will be 2n minus 1, 2n plus 1, and then still that 5n minus 1 out back. All right, next up, number 8, we want to factor some more. I see there's no GCF here, so I'm actually going to do X box. So A times C would be negative 36, and then B would be 9. So when I think about what multiplies to make 36, I think of 2 and 18. I think of 3 and 12, and I think of 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. So do any of those subtract to make 9? Yes, the 3 and the 12, if I make the 3 negative. I do, though, need to use the grouping technique here. So these just tell me to split this up into negative 3x and positive 12x. And then I do need these terms as well. So for a, actually, this should be a right there. And so we have 4a squared and then negative 9. So now I'll group up here. So it looks like I can just take out an a. It'll give me 4a minus 3. And on this group, if I take out a 3, it'll leave me 4a minus 3 as well. So I get a plus 3 and 4a minus 3. All right, next up we're going to describe the transformations here. So this would be a shift, and this would be right 1, because it's the opposite of what you would think in there. This would be a shift down 15, excuse me. So yeah, any number adding or subtracting out back is up or down. And then the number out front, first of all, if it's negative, you have a reflection. I do not have a reflection here. And then we evaluate if it's greater than 1, it's a stretch. If it's less than 1 like this, it's a shrink, and that's going to be a vertical shrink. All right, next up, we have to decide whether this function has a max or a min value. So already I know that this has an a value that's positive, so it's going to be an upward-facing parabola. So you can see that the vertex is the minimum. And so for part B, we actually have to find the vertex. Now this is in standard form, so you have to do negative b over 2a. So that's negative 3 over 6, and that reduces to negative 1/2. So now I need to plug that back in to find y. So I plug it in for every x. All right, I have to do PEMDAS here, so I have to square the fraction first. So this is going to turn into 1 over 4. You square the top and the bottom, and it comes out positive 1 over 4. Next up, I'm going to do my multiplication. So we just do top times top up top, bottom times bottom on bottom. And so this will be negative 3 over 2, and this will be positive 2 over 1. Now I need to add these together, so I have to think about common denominator here. So I'm going to make all the denominators 4. So I get 3 over 4 minus 6 over 4 plus 8 over 4. And that'll give me 3 minus 6 is negative 3, plus 8 is 5 over 4. So 5 over 4 is the y value of my vertex. The point is negative 1/2, comma 5 over 4. But for the part B, the answer is just the y value. And then lastly, we have domain and range. Domain, remember, is always all real numbers for quadratics. The range, though, always has to do with the max or min value. Now this one's a min, so all my y values are going to be above 5 over 4. So I'm going to say y is greater than or equal to 5 over 4. All right, next up here, we're graphing this out of vertex form. So it's very easy here to find the vertex. We just switch the sign of the x value inside there, and then keep the sign of the y value outside there. So my vertex is going to be right there. I can also draw my axis of symmetry going through the vertex. It's always a vertical line. And then my y-intercept, I need to plug in a 0 in for x. And so we get 2 times 1 minus 1, and so that comes out to 1. So I can put my y-intercept at positive 1. And then remember there's a matching point on the other side of the axis of symmetry, so that'll give us our parabola.